Welcome to Late Boomers, our podcast guide to creating your third act with style, power, and impact. Hi, I'm Cathy Worthington.
And I'm Mary Elkins. Join us as we bring you conversations with successful entrepreneurs, entertainers, and people with vision who are making a difference in the world.
Everyone has a story, and we'll take you along for the ride on each interview, recounting the journey our guests have taken to get where they are, inspiring you to create your own path to success. Let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Late Boomers, the podcast where we talk about reinvention, resilience, and living boldly in the second half of life. I'm Cathy Worthington.
And I'm Mary Elkins. And today's conversation is one we think a lot of our listeners will truly feel in their bones.
We're talking about letting go of perfection, embracing imperfection, and finding meaning and even joy in the messy middle of everyday life.
That is so true because so many of us were raised to keep going, don't complain, and hold it together even when that came at a personal cost.
Our guest today challenges all of that with wisdom, humor, and a refreshingly honest voice.
She's an author, fiber artist, and motivational speaker who has spoken to more than 22,000 people.
We're so happy to welcome Lorie Kleiner Eckert, author of High on Life. Lorie, welcome to Late Boomers.
Well, I'm so thrilled that there is a late boomers and that I fit the category. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I know. We're probably one
It's
of the only ones.
we hope so. Well, there's a group of us, a large group of us. But Lorie, your book is titled High on Life. Can you explain the meaning of high, and that's spelled C-H-A-I, and how your
Right.
Jewish heritage shapes the book's unique approach to everyday wisdom?
Yeah, there's so many meanings for the title of the book that we could write a whole book on that. So yes, it is, a lot of people call it chai on life because it looks like chai tea, and that's a
It does.
perfectly fine thing to call it because it's a comforting book, and so chai tea is comforting, so I like that. But my intention was high on life, and, chai is a mystical word in Hebrew, and if you've heard the toast "L'chaim," to life, that's what it
Mhm.
means. It means life, and it's a good luck kinda charm too. So, when I wrote this book, I was high on life, or that's where I hope people will get, in spite of the fact that life is difficult. I'm not a Pollyanna. Life is difficult, but it's still enjoyable and so forth. So high as a Hebrew word, and I don't know if you have Jewish friends, but some would say Hanukkah and some would say Hanukkah. That's a
Hanukkah.
s Yeah, it's the same thing.
Sort
It's
of
a
like Adam
CH word.
Sandler, Hanukkah.
You got
Yeah,
it.
His
Yes,
son.
Adam Sandler.
yeah.
Yes. But I choose to say it high, and so that it sounds like I'm high on life. But if people want to find it at Amazon or any bookstore, they have to remember the chai tea.
Yeah, the chai tea.
Yeah.
So how
And
do how does your heritage, the Jewish heritage, let me say that right, the Jewish heritage that you hold dear, how does that shape your approach to everyday wisdom?
Yeah, well, I think that we are all, composite of everything that we've done in our life. So I've been a Jewish woman. Um, some of my stories might have something. I would say so. There's 36 stories in the book, and I'd say maybe 8 of them, or I don't know, 10 of them maybe, or have something really Jewish in it. One of them would be, well, I like to say that High on Life has stories ranging from topics on belly fat to Billy Joel. And, and the Billy Joel story does have a really specific Jewish tie-in, in that I went to hear his concert, and it was in the fall of the year, and when he sang Big Shot, everyone in the stadium, thousands of people stood up and sang Big Shot with him. And I don't know if it's Rolling Stone or one of those kinds of magazines has called that his most, ticked off song in his,
Mhm.
in his whole batch of songs. And I happened to be there in the fall of the year, which is the Jewish high holiday season. And at Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, we start to reflect on our lives. And on Yom Kippur, 10 days later, we look for atonement. We look for forgiveness. We apologize to people we've harmed. And in the end, we are forgiven. God forgives us.
Mhm.
So here's Billy Joel enraged on a stage and thousands of people enraged with our own brand of whoever the big shot is. And I thought to myself, Billy Joel is earning royalties on his anger. I'm not, you know. So there's no benefit for me to walk around with this anger. So that's how my Jewish heritage comes into it. And I think it's an interesting perspective. I think it's a great
Mhm.
It
perspective.
is.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Really good. Yeah, a core theme of the book is rejecting perfectionism in favor of good enough.
Mm.
So why do you think so many of us are obsessed with perfection?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I have always been I think we're wired that way. I'm wired that way.
Me too.
Um, yeah, and I think I also if someone would give me a pat on the back and say, "Job well done," I would know, you know? A story in the book is called In Praise of Praise, and it's like my parents didn't believe in, praising, my brother and me because we would get swelled heads. And
Oh,
then when my parents saw me interacting with my children and praising them, they said, they'll get swelled heads. And it's like, but if I don't tell them they're doing a good job, how will they know? So I think that lots of us need that pat on the back and we don't readily get it. We really need to be able to give it to ourselves, but we don't.
I
And
know.
so we keep striving for perfection because if you're perfect, well, of course you did it right, you know? So,
Mhm.
but you get yourself into so much trouble over it. So
I
in
think
high
all
on
of these things are instilled in us by parents.
oh,
My mom would say, "Why is it an A minus?" You
yeah,
know? And she didn't mean to be cruel. She was never cruel. She was like the most loving person. But I think we all get that perfectionism. We weren't born with it. We learned
yeah,
it somewhere,
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
probably
right?
true, and my dad was an immigrant, and immigrants notoriously I don't know if that's the right word, but they always want their children to do better than they did or than they were
Yeah.
allotted the opportunities when they came to
Mhm.
this country.
Right.
yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, we all have, I mean, a work ethic is a good thing to have, you know?
Yeah.
And when I was a college student, when I was a high school student, even, my mom and dad would say to my brother and to me, "Do your best." Didn't make any difference what we brought home on the report card. Did you do your best? You know? And I really needed that pat on the back. And so it was like, well, gosh, did I do my best? Well, if I studied 5 hours, I could have studied six, and I kept
Mm.
escalating like that. And so instead of just doing my best, I did everybody's best. I
Uh,
mean,
oh, I
I'm a
get
magna
that.
cum laude graduate. I could have been a summa cum laude, but anyway, but that's
Yeah.
how I've worked at it, and it makes for really tough life, which is one thing that's nice about getting to the boomer stage is there's a lot of things that get easier, and you realize that you don't always have to make brownies from scratch and that,
Mhm.
that you can fudge a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes they're just as good. I wanna pivot a little bit here and talk about reinvention because you write openly about it. So, what advice do you have for people who feel stuck or if they're wondering if reinvention is still possible at their age?
Oh, I define reinvention differently than most. So I say that we have all reinvented ourselves scads of times, and therefore we have lots of experience at it, and therefore we can do it again at any age, and in fact, we will do it again. So I think of everything every time we've turned a corner that's a reinvention, and I divide it into happy reinventions. You got married, you had a baby, you graduated college, and sad ones. You got a medical diagnosis that changed things. You lost a loved one. You broke up with your boyfriend. You flunked a college course. So we have to reinvent ourselves after all of these things. So my
Every day, maybe.
well, sincerely, I think so. So I think that, so my pat on the back to everyone is saying, you've done this 100 times. And how did you do it? You've got a college degree, but what do you do with it? You have to look for a job. So I have a very easy recipe for reinvention in High on Life, and it only has 2 steps because when it's a sad reinvention, if someone's passed away or whatever, you really just wanna be on the sofa with your head covered over, with a blanket.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
my method is very simple, only 2 steps. The first step is whatever is your normal routine on a good day, like before that horrible thing happened, that's what you have to do. So I'm sure you brush your teeth. I'm sure you shower. I'm sure you get some amount of sleep that's right for you. All of those things that you do when life is good, you have to definitely be sure to do all of that when you're in a tough reinvention. And then after having that healthy routine for you, you have to take one step a day in the direction of your new life. Just one step a day. And I also like to say, if like if it's a positive reinvention, you just got the college degree, now you're making phone calls to look for a job or you're doing internet searches or whatever. You might have a really good day where you do 17 somethings toward getting a job, and great, good for you. Let me pat you on the back. But tomorrow, you only have to do one. You don't have to give yourself the pressure of that. And I suggest that you have an accountability log so that you write down the date and what you did.
Mhm.
And then, Mary, to your comment, really, we are reinventing ourselves daily, and especially as we get older and the hips aren't moving as well or whatever.
Yeah.
And so, what did we do today to make life a little bit better, easier to reinvent ourselves into the person that we are today? Yeah, yeah. But oh my
That's
gosh,
excellent.
you can reinvent and you can reinvent and you can reinvent and you have. And that's another thing. If you do have an accountability log, which doesn't have to be anything fancy. My first one was a green spiral notebook from Kroger, from the grocery store. But maybe, turn a few pages towards the back and write down like your um your resume, everything that you've accomplished. And don't forget to include that you were in charge of the bake sale for the Girl Scouts 20 years ago, because all of these are things that you've accomplished, and you helped raise $200 for the elementary school, for goodness sake. Good for you. So to develop a list for your down days to remind you of how magnificent you are.
That's such a
I
great
love that.
idea.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
love that. I think
I
all
think
of us
so.
should do that because I think we do discredit little things like that, and we don't realize those are character builders. That's why it's how we got where we are right now. I want to ask you, you're a stigma-free advocate for mental health, and why is it important to normalize therapy for everyday life, not just for crisis moments?
Well, let's see, I do have a story again in High on Life,
Okay.
um, that talks about this. So I personally started counseling when my son was 14, and I ended counseling 20 some years later when the therapist retired. And I feel no embarrassment in telling you this. She became a paid professional friend. We only got to talk about my problems. We didn't have to talk about hers. And she
Mhm.
remembered things that I forgot and reminded me of things that I forgot. So I think that I where I ended up in the story in High on Life is that was with, or where I probably started, where why I wrote it was after the suicides of Anthony Bourdain and Kate Spade, who had everything, or so it seemed to all of us, and yet they couldn't go on with their lives. So and that story ends with the suicide prevention hotline. So But I also want my readers to know that my problems were terribly insignificant. You know, what sent me to counseling when my son was 14 was not that he was in a gang, not that he was flunking out, nothing like that, that he wasn't even talking back to me. What the problem was is that he was getting himself and his friends to the mall after school and needing me to come get him when I was cooking dinner at rush hour. That is not really that's a first world problem, you know, and
Mhm.
in High on Life, I apologize to those women who are working and then have to come home and wonder what they're gonna cook and then cook and don't have a car that's reliable. I have had my life was so easy compared to so many, and yet that was overwhelming to me, and I sought help for it. And so as I kinda laugh at myself over it, it was my problem. So I, took it to a therapist, and we talked about it, and we talked about it, and we talked about it, and everything else that came its way. And then, of course, over the 20 years I saw her, my mother died, my I got divorced, I had a couple of relationships that came and went, a lot of stuff that it helps to have a voice of reason, and that's what a therapist is. And people can do therapy online now. You can do it on Zoom, go for it. Why not?
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, it doesn't work as well, I don't think. It's that personal touch. I mean, really just being in the room
Yeah.
is,
But I
to
think a
me,
lot of
more
people
important.
prefer and they're more likely to do it if they do it on Zoom or FaceTime because
Well, that's
there's
true.
they don't have to drive anywhere, especially in LA traffic or whatever wherever you live. Or if you don't have transportation and that kind of thing, it makes it very accessible, which in the old days nobody had.
That's
Right.
So
true.
I think it's really good to take advantage of that. And I love your story about that.
Yeah, I do too.
'Cause it wasn't a big maybe to someone else, but it that's where the stigma-free thing comes in because you didn't attach a stigma to it for yourself.
Oh, no. And in that story, I had listened to an NPR, radio show. They were podcasts, I don't think, back then in the 1990s. And they talked about it stresses on on families for not having enough money. And then they went through the different, different socioeconomic groups. So they talked to someone who was struggling to put a roof over their head and then worked their way up to somebody who was earning $1 million a year and was having trouble finding a stable for their horses, you know? So in both cases, these people had problems,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
very, very different, but still
Mhm.
could benefit from talking to
Yeah,
somebody.
we all have our
Yeah,
own issues and our own insecurities, no matter how much money or fame or whatever it is that we believe we have. We still are that person possibly who thinks, well, is that really me? I mean, I'm faking it. But
Mhm.
that, what is it?
mhm,
That, what is it? Imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah, I'm just here to tell you life is difficult and honor whatever feels difficult to you, and talk to someone about it. Maybe you have a good friend. Maybe that
Yeah.
works. And
Yeah.
another thing that I do suggest in High on Life, I talk about the many reasons, several reasons to write in a journal. And one of them is to break on your problems, and I believe that every time you tell someone your problem, which includes writing it in a journal, you give a little piece of it away. And
Mhm.
so tell a friend or do counseling if you can.
Mhm.
Uh, and certainly journal writing is a really wonderful thing to do as well.
Yeah. Well, you've got me thinking, when I mentioned my father, about past generations. And how do you honor past generations without romanticizing the sacrifices that may have cost them deeply?
Yeah, I don't think we ever really give our ancestors the credit that they deserve. Um,
Mhm.
You know, so I'm Jewish, so not only do we honor Holocaust survivors, but we honor children of Holocaust survivors. But what about survivors of World War One or survivors of World War Two or survivors of Vietnam? And then the children of all of those people. So I don't think that we give enough credit to the people that came before us. I don't. But that's a process of a lifetime also to figure out a way to honor your ancestors, don't you think? Mary, are you
Mhm.
writing about your family or anything like that to
Yeah, as
preserve
a
it?
matter of fact, I've done
Yeah,
that, yeah. Books
yeah.
put in the drawer right now, but yeah.
Well, somebody's gonna find it and it'll come out of the drawer. Maybe it'll be you.
And s
Possibly.
and I wanna ask you, how do you use humor to tackle serious topics like fear and body image and aging and self-doubt?
I kind of feel like I am Lucille Ball. If you had
Oh,
when Johnny Carson had Lucille Ball on the show, she wasn't at all funny, you know? And I don't know that I'm at all funny in real life, but somehow when I tell stories, I find the humor in them. And, um, and so that's what it is, you know? So if you have a fender bender or you get pulled over by the police for something or you know or whatever the pipes break in winter when you get enough distance on it you can tell it in a fun way and it makes fun of yourself even one of the stories on High on Life, could I be promoting that book? uh, is called That Time That I Needed a Husband, and it was about, the pipes breaking
mhm.
in the winter, and when we turned the water back on outside in the spring, I suddenly had very wet carpeting in 2 rooms in my house,
Oh.
plus a hole in the wall where water had gushed through. So, it was
Yeah,
horrible.
just
It was
titling it like that
yeah.
makes you see the humor in the
Well,
situation.
exactly, and where I got with it as I wrote it, do you remember the movie, I think it was Shelley Long and Tom Hanks, The Money Pit? And they buy a
Mm.
big house that's a money pit, and everything that they're fixing, they say to the contractor, "How long is it gonna take?" And he says, "Oh, 2 weeks." The answer is always 2 weeks. So I use that as a running gag in my story, but by the end of the story, I say, "If you ask me when my beautiful new basement is gonna be complete, I'd have to say 2 weeks," but I'm laughing now. I say it with
And how long
humor.
has it been?
Yeah. Well, it took several months, but it's beautiful, you know? So yeah, so I think, pain plus time, isn't that what they say equals humor? Isn't that what comedians tell you? So,
Oh,
yeah,
love
so I
that.
think that's where it is. And then also when I was the motivational speaker person, so for 10 years, I entertained audiences. My visual aids were quilts that I made that had words and symbols pieced into the design. And I've always, in my current book and all the books I've written, I'm telling the stories of my life, hoping you can glean life lessons from them. And, what was I gonna tell you about this? I don't know,
I don't know.
and, I don't know. Oh, I know what I was gonna tell you. And so, I illustrated my talk with quilts that had words and symbols pieced into the design, but I didn't just take it to quilters because quilters didn't pay well. I took it to every group from PTAs to Procter& and Gamble. And the shtick that I gave, the story, the, program that I presented showed whatever 12 quilts I was speaking about. I ultimately had 3 different sets of 12 quilts, but, it wasn't
Wow.
a canned speech, but I knew what made the audience laugh. So I made sure that if I had gotten a laugh last time on this story, that I told it again. So you have a quilt that's shaped like an hourglass, and it says, "If not now, when?" And and it's part of the full quote is from a rabbi, Hillel, who said, "If I am not for myself, who will be for me? If I am for myself alone, what am I? And if not, now when?" So it's the golden rule, basically, do unto others and do it now. So my kids were little when during the story, and we were out running errands, and we stopped at the drugstore for candy on the way home. And my two older children got M&Ms, and my little one, Lisa, who's her siblings were 5 and 7 years older than she got Skittles. And when we got home, she wanted to share candy, which is great. I taught her to do that. And they would have no part of it. So they went running off upstairs, and she stood at the bottom of the stairs, so mad. And she shouted after them, "Well, if you won't share your M&Ms, I won't scare my Skittles." So we always got a good laugh for that because she got her words.
There's some moral to that though,
Yeah, she
isn't
got
there?
her words confused, but I clapped her on the back and I said, "Way to go, kid. Of course, you're willing to share with your brother and sister, but if they're not willing to share with you, you have to take care of yourself. That is an important life lesson." And when
Absolutely.
Absolutely, and when I use that "if not now, when" in High on Life, every story in High on Life has a full color image and a one-line takeaway to go with it. But when I use that "if not now, when" story, not that story, a different story about those words though, um, I use it to talk about self-care. And so whereas
Well, let's talk
every
about self-care and let's talk about living authentically using your self-care. What does that mean to you? And also, talking about self-care again, embracing your, as you say, flawsome identity. How has that changed your life?
Yeah.
I love that word.
Yeah,
Blossom.
I love it too.
Flossom, yes. Well, I am Flossom, and one of the things that's wrong with me, I'm tall and I'm thin, but I have a belly. But I say I'm Flossom because I understand where that belly came from. It came from having those 3 wonderful children that I have. So that's, really, where does self-care come from? If you don't take care of yourself, who's going to? And I think that there are 2 kinds of people in the world, the givers and the takers. And if you're a giver, you can be running on empty really fast. But you
Mhm.
have to remember um, that golden rule that you're part of it too. So you have to do unto yourself a little bit. So that's where self-care comes from. And
Like your
again,
daughter about sharing.
yes, yes, exactly. Yeah. So that story in High on Life has 3 takeaways all about self-care, stuff like, what if you devoted today to loving yourself? Hmm, what
Mm.
about that? That would be a great idea. And we're blessed as in this stage of life that things are a little bit slower. And so it's a little bit easier to fit in a little
Mhm.
here than it
I
used to.
agree. I
Yeah.
agree. So tell us how quilting, because that's very unique, and public speaking influence your storytelling and your connection with audiences.
Well, so when I got divorced, I had been a stay-at-home mom for 21 years. I was 42 and I needed a job. And so I thought I would turn my hobby of quilt making into a paid profession. And I'm a very good quilt technician, which means that if the fabric has Christmas trees, they all stand upright, none of them are taking a nap, that kind of thing. I know how to cut the fabric right. But I don't think I'm the greatest quilt artist. So when I started off, I was thinking that I was gonna market myself to quilt audiences. But what makes me unique is I was making quilts with words pieced into the design. So the word said, "Bloom and soar, come as you are, you're lovely. If not now, when?" And and so, um, one morning after making a dozen quilts, with words in them, a slightly more poetic version of the words was running through my head, and I got up and wrote them down and realized that a book had been written. I didn't write it, I made the quilts, but the book had been written, And this was a series of vows you might make to yourself as you start a new portion of your life. Me, I'm getting divorced, but the vows start, I love you as the sequel with acceptance and love of the self, the story that must come first. And toward the lofty goal of love, I journey forth today, making these vows to myself. And then you got to bloom, you got to soar, you got to do it, if not now, when. And so that's where so I started off telling the stories behind the quilt. You already heard about the story behind the if not now when. And I would tell the stories of my quilts, the stories behind them to develop concepts of self acceptance, self esteem, power of positive thinking. No rocket
Mhm.
science here. There was no rocket science. And I would tell my audiences that my degree's in elementary education. I'm not a psychologist. I can't tell you how to live your life, but it can tell you stories of my life. And if they resonate with you, go for it. So,
Did forgiveness was forgiveness a part of your quilt, and how do you see that as a personal necessity? And talking about self-care, part of self-care.
yeah, forgiveness, yes, it was there because there was a quilt in that first book that says change is, and it was illustrated. Oh, change is with a period. So, end of sentence. My mom, when she was being firm about something, she'd say, period. We're not discussing this any further. So the quilt says change is, period. And it's surrounded by a quilt pattern called ocean waves because the ocean waves roll in and roll out and roll in and roll out, and they change and they change and they change, and they don't feel guilty for it. So that's where forgiveness came in the early days. And now forgiveness comes in for me um, back with that Billy Joel story. So in Judaism, on that high holiday, on Yom Kippur, when you ask for forgiveness and you make you atone for your sins and so forth. At the end of the day, you are told that you are forgiven. And so if God can forgive me, I have to forgive myself because
Mhm.
otherwise I'm holding myself to higher standards than God. That's insane. So forgiveness towards myself, I don't struggle with as much as forgiveness towards others. you know, you done me wrong, so
It is kind of a revelation when you know somebody that has held a grudge against somebody for a long time, and when they do forgive them, you do see them open up. Because I had a
yeah.
girlfriend that was really angry with her mother for a long time, and I used to say, "You really need to let go of it, forgive her. She didn't know what she was doing or whatever." And eventually she did forgive her mom, and she became such a different person. It was really interesting, like, more calm and, like, not so hyped up and stuff. It was really amazing. So it does become like self-care because we feel better, right?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna tell you, you have to write that story also. It's important to get these stories down. That's a beautiful life
Well, I'm
lesson.
not a quilter, but that is good. Yeah. And how do you reclaim joy in small victories and everyday moments?
Well, I think that I'm just grateful. I just see that there are lots of things to be grateful for, and so that's where the joy is. The A quilt that I have not made, but that I have designed says, goes with the expression, "The joy is in the journey." And the reality is that the word journey starts with J-O and ends with Y. So take that with you. That's a beautiful message from above. The joys in the journey. So you have to find the joy in the journey, and you have to be grateful for really every little thing, so I'm actually developing a new thought on this, that there's a kind of left-handed way to be grateful, and that is to take any situation and tell me how it could be worse, So you had that fender bender. How could it be worse? Someone could have been hurt, could have been a whole lot more damage, could have been rush hour, how embarrassing to stop traffic. And so that gives you gratitude for it was just a fender bender. Does that make any sense? So
Yes, it
so
does.
I've been thinking in those terms lately, maybe
Yeah.
since the pandemic when we didn't have a plan B, we just had to take what we got. Here we are at home and can't see the kids and can't have dinner with friends and stuff like that. It's
A
like,
late boomer problem.
yeah. Yeah,
Or
and
Well,
yeah,
yeah,
and
it
yeah,
what are
was,
you gonna do?
and the
There wasn't.
young people who were in school at the time of the pandemic were hit the worst. And
yeah.
they'll never get that time back. And, they missed their graduation or they missed. So I hope those people can find some kind of solace in knowing that some good things came of it from being
Yeah,
home with the family
Yeah,
or
yeah.
something they can look toward.
Well,
yeah.
I just think that if you sit down and think about it, you'll come up with a lot of things. So, my story, 30 Reasons to be Grateful at my granddaughter's soccer game. 30 reasons to be grateful at a soccer game, but, the funny
Mhm.
one that everyone laughs at is that another grandma had her shirt inside out, but it wasn't me. So, you know, so,
Oh,
it was
why
a
have I heard that so much about people wearing shirts inside out? I'm like freaked out that I'm gonna do that
do that.
someday because I've heard
That's
so
too
many
funny.
people complain about their mother
See?
doing that or
How
something.
you can be so grateful that you haven't done that. That's a reason to be
Uh-huh.
grateful. That's a
I
I'm
reason to
sure
love
well, that's sort
and
of like being Blossom if you do.
yes. Oh, yes, definitely. You'll be perfectly flawsome then.
So, Lori,
Blossom.
what surprised you most about writing this book?
Hmm. So what surprised me the most about writing this book? I guess, I have 5 books in print, and the first 3 were published by a traditional publisher, and the 4th one I self-published, so I guess it was shocking, surprising, wonderful to find a traditional publisher again in Bancroft Press, and,
Bravo.
yeah, yeah, and I do have to
We
pat
know
myself
that's
on the back.
really hard. We
That's
we
a
interview
really hard
we
hard thing.
interview a lot of authors, and
Yes,
most of them do self-publish, and that's
yeah,
really wonderful.
yeah, and it's the same
Congratulations.
yeah, so I think that that was kind of surprising, um and my experience with the publisher, Bruce Boards, was kind of comical too because I gave him 18 stories. Another meaning for high is the number 18, so 18's a lucky number in Judaism. So I gave him 18 stories because this was gonna be 18 stories about being high on life, and he said that he really needed more stories than that. Could we do 36? And I forget exactly how he worded it, but I said to him, "Am I understanding you correctly? If I give you 36 stories, we have a deal?" And he wrote back, "Yes." "Oh, well, that was easy.
Okay.
I can do that." So many of the stories from High on Life, there as I say, 36 stories, about a dozen are brand new, and about 2 dozen had been published before, many in my personal blog on my website. So it was like, "Yeah, I can get that to you tomorrow. I got a whole, storehouse of
Oh, wow.
great stories that are evergreen. Not everything I write is evergreen, I like, I'm writing one. I wrote one this recently on podcasting. Well, you're not going to want to read about podcasting in 15 years, but the ones that I write about significant birthdays or life cycle events for the family or whatever, or death in the family, those are evergreen. So I plucked
Mhm.
the evergreen stories, and I really think, like, maybe not the next day, but 2 days later, I gave him 36 stories, and I really thought he'd say, "Oh, I don't like this one, I don't like that one." He didn't. "Oh, great. Okay, good." We're satisfied.
Yay, bravo.
Yeah,
Well,
bravo.
if listeners could take one idea from High on Life and use it tomorrow, what would you hope it would be?
Oh, to preserve their own stories. Their own stories are magnificent, and even if it's a little funny snippet that child said, I'm not going to scare my shittles, or, that kind of thing. Write it down because it's going to be gone otherwise. So I would say start some kind of a journal. And it
Mm.
can also be part of your accountability log. So if you are reinventing yourself right now, one thing a day, teeny tiny step forward. Yeah, but write it down. I've encouraged both of you to write stories, and that, I've got a lot of great stories. You do too. You do too. Tell them.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
you're right.
important.
You're
Yeah.
right.
That's great advice. Thank
Yeah.
you, Lorie. Thank you for your honesty. Thank you for your humor. And of course, your generosity. Thank you. And if not now, when shall we all be that way?
Hmm. And thank you for reminding us that life doesn't have to be perfect to be meaningful. Love
And you
that.
can find High on Life wherever books are sold. And her companion journal you can get on Amazon. And also you can reach Lorie on her website, loriekleinereckert.com.
Should we spell that, Lorie, for them? You
Oh,
want to spell all
sure.
your
Shall I
names?
do it? Yes, it's all
A little
smushed together,
tricky. A
no
little tricky.
spaces. Yeah, LorieKleinereckert. But I'll tell you, I am so all over the internet because they seem to put out, I have written 175 blogs, I've written 250 book reviews, I've written so
Mhm.
much that all of those seem to pop up one by one. So if you Google Lorie Kleiner Eckert, the first thing that's going to come up, and probably any spelling, the first thing that's going to come up is my website, which is great for you to have, but all these stories will pop up. So I'm really easy to find. And if your listeners want to really find me, Lorie at loriekleinereckert.com.
Ah,
Excellent. Well, thank you to our listeners today for listening to Late Boomers. Please subscribe and share with a friend. And until next time, keep living boldly.
Thank you for joining us on Late Boomers, the podcast that is your guide to creating a third act with style, power, and impact. Please visit our website and get in touch with us at
lateboomers.us.
if you would like to listen to or download other episodes of Late Boomers. Go to ewnpodcastnetwork.com.
This podcast is also available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and most other major podcast sites. We hope you make use of the wisdom you've gained here and that you enjoy a successful third act with your own style, power, and impact.